Living off grid sounds like, the ultimate dream, right? Freedom from bills, no landlord, no noisy neighbors, just you, nature, and maybe a tiny house tucked in the woods. But the truth, living off grid comes with a learning curve. And let me tell you something, mistakes, they can get very expensive very fast. I've been there and I made them. And today I'm going to share the off grid mistakes that cost me money, and so you can hopefully avoid making the same ones. And when I first decided to go off grid, I thought it would be simple. All right. I imagine, some solar panels, a water catchment system, and a cozy cabin with zero bills and a complete independence. But what I didn't realize is that freedom comes with responsibility. And if you're not careful, small oversights can turn into some major costs. Some of these mistakes are obvious in hindsight, and some things nobody really talks about in the pretty little Instagram photos or the off grid living. And these aren't theoretical, these are real mistakes that, hit my wallet and sometimes very hard at that. And the first mistake that cost me money was underestimating energy needs. When I installed a solar system, I thought I'll just get a few panels and a small battery, and that'll be enough. And I had no idea how much electricity I actually use. I forgot to factor in everything like lights, the fridge, the fans, the charging devices, and water pumps, and the little things like running a heater in the winter or a dehumidifier when it got humid. Within a few months, I found my battery bank constantly drained, my solar system struggling, and I was forced to buy an extra panel, bigger batteries, and more wiring. That mistake alone cost me thousands of dollars. And the lesson? Always overestimate, your energy needs. Always. It's cheaper to build a bigger system from the start than to expand it later. The second big mistake was poor water planning. I thought a simple rainwater catchment system and a small storage tank would be enough. Turns out, when the dry season hit, my ran low faster than expected. I had to haul water from a nearby spring, which was a huge pain and also meant paying for a pump and storage upgrades. I also underestimated water filtration needs. I had a basic filter and thought that was sufficient. It wasn't. I ended up buying an expensive filtration system and replacement cartridges that I hadn't budgeted for. Lesson learned here. Plan for water scarcity, filtration, and redundancy. It's not just convenient, it's essential. Another costly mistake, underestimating the importance of tools and backups. Living off grid means that when something breaks, there's no landlord or maintenance guy to call. Your tools become your lifeline. I didn't buy enough tools at first, thinking I could make do with what I had. When my generator failed, when a pipe leaked, or when a solar connection came loose, I had to make emergency purchases at a premium. And that added up fast. So the lesson, invest in quality tools and spares from the beginning. It's cheaper than paying emergency prices, and it helps prevent, small problems from becoming big ones. I also made a huge mistake with planning for insulation and weatherproofing. My tiny house, it was cozy in the summer, but winter, it hit me hard. I had to buy extra heaters, blankets and insulation upgrades. And mid-season, not only did it cost money, but it also meant my energy system got strained trying to heat the space. In hindsight, spending a little more on insulation up front would have saved me hundreds in heating and energy costs. Tiny houses can lose heat fast, especially, in off-grid setups. So investing in proper insulation and weatherproofing is non-negotiable. One of the less obvious but very expensive mistakes I made was ignoring long-term maintenance costs. Living off-grid isn't just about installation. Okay, every system requires upkeep. The solar panels need cleaning, batteries need monitoring, water pumps they need servicing, filters need replacing. I neglected some of these maintenance tasks early on thinking they weren't urgent. It ended up costing me. It really did. Some parts they degraded faster than expected, and I had to replace components I could have extended with proper care. The takeaway: budget for ongoing maintenance, not just upfront costs. I also learned the hard way about underestimating internet and connectivity needs. Living off grid in a remote location is amazing for peace and solitude until you realize that your work, banking, and communication relies on stable internet. I tried this simple, mobile hotspot, but it was unreliable. If I had to invest in a satellite internet system, that setup wasn't cheap, and it was something I hadn't even thought about moving off grid. So here's a lesson: if you need to stay connected, plan for it financially and technically. I recommend Starlink. One of my more frustrating mistakes was neglecting proper storage and organization. Living off grid means every item has to earn its place. I didn't think about how to store supplies efficiently. And clutter quickly became a problem. I ended up buying extra shelves, bins, and even a small shed to keep tools and water and food organized. Disorganization not only wastes time, but also it leads to accidental waste, spoilage, or damage. So tiny off-grid spaces, they require smart storage planning from the start. Another mistake that ended up being expensive was buying cheap or incompatible equipment. Early on, I went for, bargain solar components, cheap water pumps or low cost generators, thinking it would save money. What actually happened was I spent more replacing them than I would have if I had invested in reliable quality equipment from the start. So the lesson: sometimes spending more upfront saves a lot of money and time and headaches in the long run. I also didn't account for unexpected permits and legal costs. Living off grid isn't completely lawless. Depending on where you are, you may need permits for wells, your septic system, or electrical installations. I assumed I could avoid some of these requirements and ended up paying fines and having to retrofit some systems to meet code. That costs money and caused delays, which is another thing to plan for if you're serious about off grid living. And food planning was another surprise. When I started, I thought I could just, buy groceries as needed. But buying off grid in a remote location often meant higher grocery costs and limited access. I ended up having to invest in long term storage, dehydrated foods, and a small freezer backup. That initial investment was significant, but it was necessary to avoid constant trips into town and prevent food spoilage. Off grid living often, comes with hidden lifestyle costs that aren't obvious until you experience them firsthand. One of the bigger financial lessons I learned was about, relying on a single power source. My system was solar only, and when we had several cloudy days, I had to run a generator just to keep things going. That meant, buying fuel, performing extra maintenance, and even renting equipment at one point. If I had planned a hybrid system from the beginning, I could have avoided that. So, lesson here: build redundancy into critical systems, whether it's power, water, or heat. Even small mistakes, they added up. Forgetting to protect plumbing from freezing in the winter cost me a burst pipe and a complete replacement of parts of my system. Overlooking minor leaks in tanks and connection led to wastewater and higher utility costs than I expected. These little things, while seemingly minor, compound over time and can turn off grid life from budget friendly into unexpectedly expensive. Another important lesson is that time is money. In off-grid living, tasks that are simple in a city, like buying extra water, fixing a generator, or collecting firewood, take time when you're off-grid. And that's time you could have spent on work, projects, or rest. Sometimes paying someone for help is cheaper in the long run, even if it feels counterintuitive to the self-sufficient philosophy. I learned this the hard way after countless hours of trial and error that could have been avoided with a small investment or expertise or labor. Ultimately, the biggest takeaway from my off grid mistakes is this: preparation is everything. I underestimated energy, water, maintenance, internet, legal requirements, storage, equipment qualities, and even mental effort required to run everything smoothly. Each of those oversights added up to the thousands of dollars, money I could have saved with better planning and realistic expectations. Off grid life is incredibly rewarding, but it's also a complex system where small mistakes can snowball into major expenses. So if you're considering off-grid living, here's my advice. Overestimate your energy and water needs. Invest in quality equipment. Plan for redundancy. Budget for maintenance. Think through storage and organization and don't ignore permits or legal requirements. Factor in the cost of your time and the hidden lifestyle expenses that come with remoteness. Learn from my mistakes so you don't have to pay the price. I did. Living off grid is worth it for the freedom, the connection to nature, and the simplicity. But if you're prepared, if your approach it with eyes wide open, realistic planning, and respect for the challenges, you can avoid costly mistakes and create a sustainable, enjoyable off grid lifestyle. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. And why don't you check out another video on here up on the right and give you a little bit more tips about tiny house living. Enjoy. Have a good day.